I come from Disney, where storytelling is our business. I'm particularly pleased to be part of this panel because we have with us individuals who are themselves storytellers, and we'll hopefully get a little bit of time to talk about that today. We think a lot about girls and their stories and aspirations at Disney, and see that today girls and their families all around the world so often want more for their daughters. A crucial part of empowering girls and women to get that more is giving them a platform to share their stories and their voice and their ambitions. What's so amazing about the conversation here today is that their aspirations are time and time again things we saw in that video, the things that make up the Sustainable Development Goals. Education, economic opportunity, a cleaner environment, strong bodies, and safety at home, school, and work. If we can truly bring women and girls fully into our effort to meet the goals, then we know we can make progress because we've all seen the statistics. If countries bring women participation up to the same level as men, they would see big jumps in the GDP. That educating girls delays childbirth and brings long-lasting benefits as their children live healthier and stay in school longer. In short, empowering girls has the ripple effect on our entire society, leading to benefits in each of the areas identified by the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm going to start now with the panelists. Sophie, I want to start with you. You're a Girl Up teen advisor and also the editor-in-chief of your school's newspaper. How has having those platforms shaped your perspective and what you are able to achieve? And I hope you can also touch a little bit on what you think is different from the opportunities of the girls you've met in Ethiopia.
Sure. So I'm the editor-in-chief of my school newspaper. Can you hear me? Yeah? No? Is it on?
Just keep talking, perhaps.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm the editor-in-chief of my school newspaper, and I'm also a teen advisor for Girl Up, and both of these platforms have given me amazing opportunity to learn about the issues I care most about, and also to turn my knowledge into tangible change. So as editor-in-chief, I have the ability to give a group that's not really listened to a lot of power, and that's teenagers. We're not really acknowledged that much as a group that has a lot to say or a lot to think about, and the newspaper is given a lot of opportunity for that. And similarly, Girl Up is a By Girls for Girls campaign, and it's completely empowered me and all of my fellow teen advisors to want to learn about our environment, to want to learn about what are the issues facing girls in other countries around the globe, and to turn that knowledge into real change. Relating to my experiences in Ethiopia, so this past summer, I went to the Girl Up Leadership Summit, which was an incredible experience. And as a teen advisor, I was there for 5 days as opposed to being there for 3 days. And teen advisors, what we do is we work very closely with the campaign, and we basically spearhead and act as like an advisory board. So we were there learning about the campaign, programming, and just being very, very empowered and feeling like we could do anything and feeling like a group of strong, motivated young women together has the power to change the world. So I was at the Leadership Summit for 5 days. And right after the Leadership Summit, I went to Ethiopia. And I've been to Ethiopia 5 times, I think, since I was a child. And every home I've been to in Ethiopia has a maid that's about school-aged. And that was something that I just accepted as being the norm. Going there from childhood, it's just a thing that's a part of daily life. Coming from the Leadership Summit, I really looked at the situation and realized how wrong that was, that there was someone my age cleaning up after me, doing my dishes, doing my laundry. And it's crazy because I always thought of myself as like an intelligent person, someone who's aware of what's going on, but I didn't realize that this cultural norm was completely backwards. And I think that's the power of being in Girl Up, of being a teen advisor, is that it really teaches you to kind of break down the walls and to deconstruct the norms that you find in daily life in society, and to realize that there's something wrong and that there's a lot that you can do to change. So both being the editor-in-chief and being a part of Girl Up has really empowered me and completely changed my world perspective.
Fantastic. So Hayley, let's turn to you. So for many women and girls, unfortunately, basic physical safety and the ability to control when to have children remains a core challenge. As a writer, how do you see women's ability to tell their stories and in how they view these issues, the actions we take to address the issues, and our ability to make progress on the goals?
So a little background for me. I was looking at the program today and reflecting on how excited I was that my title in it was Sex and Relationship Editor. I love that that was put this bluntly, because that is not the case in so many materials that we see. When I first started at Refinery 29 about 2 years ago, we were really trying to expand into talking about women's sexual health and safety, and it was proposed to me that I become the family editor. And I said, no, that is not what I'm going to be writing about. Not every woman wants a family. And I think we're seeing this really fabulous shift where we're no longer just talking about family planning, because that's not the whole picture. We're talking about women making their own choices about maybe not having families, maybe putting off families. And to talk about that, we need to talk about sex. So in my time at Refinery, I think we have already seen just such a remarkable shift in the way that women are able to talk about their sex lives and how they want them to go and the choices that they want to make. And I think a lot of that comes down to social media. I get a little annoyed when I hear about older generations perhaps saying, what's with all the Twittering and the Instagram and the, you're wasting too much time on this. But women my age are reaching out to each other on these platforms to have conversations that we've never been able to have before. Whether that's live tweeting their IUD insertions, which I actually did along with many other women earlier or last year, which was a wonderful experience and really opened up a lot of conversations, or whether that's talking about, shout your abortion. Twitter and Instagram and these other platforms have enabled us to start these conversations on our own and talk, with each other among ourselves. And that's not exclusive to developed contexts, right? We're seeing really expanding access to mobile phones and smartphones as well in so many developing countries, but we know that there's a gap there. So we know that about 300 million fewer women than men have cell phones around the world. And I think when we start to bridge that, when we start to enable everyone to have access to these platforms, to the internet, to phones, women will start these conversations by themselves. We talk about sex ed as going into a place and telling women what they need to know, but I think it really starts as a connection between two women who are just getting real with each other about the children they want to have or don't want to have, or condom negotiation, all of that. I think it starts between two women and it expands from there. And I'm excited to see mobile platforms really helping us make that leap.
Fantastic, right? So Dinnah, you have had so much experience working on gender and health issues in Uganda and in the US. If you could change one thing tomorrow that would make the greatest impact on girls' and women's life, what would that be?
Thank you. One thing. Let me try to get one thing, but maybe I might end up with one or two other things. I come from a very patriarchal cultural context. I was born and raised in Uganda, and that exposed me to the reality of what structural power relations can do and what they actually do in terms of disproportionately distributing resources, power, opportunities for women and girls. And I saw this with my own siblings, with my relatives, with the girls and boys I went to school with. And that has informed who I am and the decisions I've taken in my career and the work that I used to do in Uganda to promote women's rights in post-conflict northern Uganda and parts of southwestern Uganda, and now in the US. And with that kind of background, the one immediate thing I would want to change is how we work with men today to promote gender equality, and in all spheres that you want to look at it. I'm very passionate about sexual and reproductive health services and rights, for instance. And I would want to speak to this kind of audience about how we package our messages to reach men as we reach women. And I think one area for me is the fact that I've grown up seeing women and girls who, up to today, cannot go and access that contraceptive in open because their partners are not going to support them. I also have my own relatives who have shouldered the burden or responsibility, if you want to call it, of unwanted pregnancies on their own. And I'm always thinking to myself, where are the men? But then I know that there are organizations in this room and out there who are implementing programs to bring men on board. And my message today is, let's package reproductive health, for instance, as a shared responsibility for men as is for women. Mm-hmm. And we can do this by, I think, shaping the message to reflect the reality. Men have sexual and reproductive health needs, and they need to know that because they need to know about their HIV status. They need to know about maternal health, for instance. But then men also, like in my community, it's difficult for me to go to my village dressing up the way I am. I'm putting on a trouser if you didn't see me. Because sometimes it's more like people will reach out to give you names and try to touch you. But broadly, in some very extreme cases, these girls and women suffer sexual and gender-based violence as a result of how they are dressed. And I'm saying, let's reach out to men as change agents for them to know that the girl who is walking out on the street, who is going to be touched because of how she's dressed, is actually your sister, or she is your mother. Because the more we keep saying, for women and for girls, it sounds like, yeah, those women. But these women have brothers, and it's time we push this message across and bring the men on board to know that the change they are standing up for is not just for that other woman. But even more, if we position reproductive health and explicitly put out the role of men as clients, then we will increase demand for reproductive health services. By putting men, making this message clear to them, you need to know your status. You need to stand up when she's going to the clinic. It's your responsibility to be a part of it. But that said, sorry, I have to say one more thing. The other thing that I want to not change but speak about is economic empowerment for women and girls. And an entry point for me is skills development. And I appreciate that several partners are really working in this area. But I think the missing links for me are sort of broad, and they relate back to my patriarchal setting that I told you about. The fact that women and girls in my community are still held up in poverty, mainly because they do not have property rights. And I think that also spills over to, for instance, most likely we all know that Africa is broadly agro-based, and land and agriculture are one and the same thing. And 80% of the smallholder farmers in Africa are women and girls. Where do they farm, if they do not have the land? But then what we can do is strengthen our advocacy in these areas to make sure that the commitments that we've made for these girls and women are actually translating into reality. And part of that is strengthening monitoring and bringing stories of this kind of reality up here so that people talk about them and people trace them and people fill up the gaps, people share experiences of what worked and what did not work to inform our future progress. I think I would go on and on about these things. I'm sure you've noticed, but yeah, I'll stop there for now.
Well, you can't help but listen to their stories, all of yours, about your suggestions for the future and as you observe. And I guess the question I would have is, we sit and having a lovely lunch in Washington, D.C., what would be each of yours recommendation for those of us here to help put women and girls at the heart of the Sustainable Development Goals? What should we all be doing based on what you know to help meet the needs that you've identified?
Okay, so I think that what's very important is to, when you're making sustainable development goals and when you're making goals regarding the betterment of our our world, I think it's important to think of girls first and to think of them as the main topic as opposed to an afterthought, which I think is, going back to Girl Up, what makes it so great is it's a for girls, by girls campaign. And when it was being formed, the people thought, okay, so what's a group of people that isn't usually acknowledged, and it's adolescent girls. So I think acknowledging adolescent girls and thinking of them as a priority is what's very important in Sustainable Development Goals.
I would absolutely echo that. Talk to girls, encourage them to talk among themselves, whether that's on social media, whether that's in person. It has to start with their voices, and it has to start with their needs. And, you know, we have this one goal that is explicitly related to gender equality, but they all hinge on that. They all do, and they all hinge on women having options. And my belief is that family planning plays a role in every single one of these, and women will tell you what they need and what they want and what they can do if they have half a chance. So it starts with listening, I think.
Yeah, I think what I would call out is invest resources in section reproductive health. Because from where I see it, knowing that I started school with so many friends that I look at today and they cannot afford to, sustain their own lives because they don't have money, they did not complete school, they're heading families, and they are my age. So I think that if we invest in reproductive health and increase our fundraising, and that will also require, like I said, bringing evidence on board. Where are the girls who are sharing these stories, to inform the kind of work that we are doing? So let's invest in evidence, let's invest resources in making reproductive health services available for women and girls, and let's also bring the men on board and make this a shared responsibility, because that's how we are going to challenge the power structures that affect actual access and utilization of reproductive health services.
Great. Done? Okay. I was looking for like a sign. I got it. Well, I want to thank everyone on the panel. A wonderful, interesting conversation. A great start to a wonderful event. I understand we're going to be watching a movie, and after the movie, we're going to have an opportunity to sit at the table and chat with our wonderful folks next to us. So with that, thank you very much.